Well, yeah.
I want to come back to the humanitarian situation in Gaza, given some of your answers earlier. You mentioned the IPC report. So one of the things that report said was that a lot of the progress that had been made after you kind of gave this ultimatum to the Israelis about opening new gates and things had actually been reversed by the Israeli operation in Rafah. There was a lot of talk about that operation in Rafah. A major operation in Rafah shouldn't go ahead. Some kind of operation did go ahead. You haven't said it's a major operation, and foreign journalists have been taken there by the Israelis for the first time. I think a lot of people have seen the images. You still stick with this assessment that this wasn't a major operation, given some of the destruction. Noting that these journalists were taken in by the Israelis, so they were only able to see what the Israelis wanted them to see. And if you see the footage, it looks, pretty devastating.
Let me just say something about the humanitarian situation first before I get to that. So without a doubt, the situation remains incredibly challenging, and some of the metrics have gone down since, say, 6 weeks ago when we were getting a much steadier flow in through a number of different challenges. A big reason for that, as I said, is the just lawlessness outside of Kerem Shalom in southern Gaza that has made it very difficult to deliver humanitarian assistance around. So it's this really frustrating problem where you address one challenge, you get enough humanitarian assistance to the gate, which for a while was part of the problem, and then you have a difficulty moving it beyond the gate into Gaza. The point I was making is that we had gotten the situation somewhat stabilized. It had stopped getting worse, and we were at the point where we were trying to make it better, and we continue to try to make it better, and that is an ongoing challenge that we're all working hard on. When it comes to Rafah, no, nothing has changed. What we made clear is we did not want to see the type of military operation that looked like the military operations we saw in Gaza City, we saw in Khan Yunis, where you had mass civilian casualties. You had, in some neighborhoods, almost complete and total destruction. And the Rafah operation has looked different, which is not to say at all that there has not been destruction. Of course there has. There have been a great number of homes and other facilities that have been destroyed. The damage in Rafah does not appear to be as great, and we'll have there'll be assessments of this over time, but it does not appear to be as great as those in Khan Yunis and those in Gaza City. And notably, the civilian harm has been reduced in operations. If you just look at the number of civilian casualties, I should say the number of casualties, because often when you get the number from the Gaza Health Ministry, it's impossible oftentimes to differentiate between civilians and militants. The casualty number has come down dramatically over the past few months, which isn't to say there aren't still civilians being killed. There are, and any number is unacceptable. We want to see that number go to zero. But the operation has, just in terms of the results, looked different than the operations in Gaza City and Khan Yunis. All that said, we want to get a ceasefire so we see an end to the death and destruction in Rafah and elsewhere in Gaza.
I think a lot of people would say the way that you gave a very strong warning, a very clear warning, don't go into Rafah. We can debate whether it's a major operation, but there is still a huge amount of destruction, hundreds of thousands of people displaced. Yeah, the death toll might be a little bit lower, but there's still a rising death toll. This was supposed to be, or I think was communicated as a way that the U.S. was, restraining the Israelis from committing more of the worst kind of, or creating the worst kind of images that we'd seen earlier on in the war and worsening the humanitarian situation. The humanitarian situation has got worse as a result of the operation. Yeah, maybe it falls short of some category for a major operation, but doesn't this basically, what has happened is that Israel has gone ahead with almost what you were telling them not to.
So it is a different operation than what they were initially planning, and is a different operation than the one that we were very much making clear we were opposed to. It's not to say that we have agreed with every tactic that they have pursued, that we have agreed with every strike that they have taken. Of course, we can always look at things and say this isn't the right way to do this. You should have done more to minimize civilian casualties. But when we made clear what we were opposed to, we had a very specific operation in mind, and what we saw ultimately did not look like that type of operation.
You're talking about the casualty figures coming down. So is there an acceptable level? 50 a day is okay, but
no, acceptable level is zero for civilian casualties. Now, we want to see militant casualties. Of course, is a very different thing. We want to see them prosecute the campaign against Hamas, but we don't want to see any civilian casualties.
Just two really quick questions on Israel. There's a report that the U.S. and Egypt are going to work on a high-tech underground barrier to prevent smuggling of weapons from Egypt into Gaza, and they've told Israel that they will work on this effort if there's a ceasefire and hostage agreement. Is that accurate?
So I will answer that generally, which I know you won't like. I'm not going to confirm that or speak to that in detail, but we do believe that smuggling across the border from Egypt into Gaza was a very real problem that needed to be addressed. It's one of the ways that Hamas was able to arm itself, that Hamas was able to fund itself, and that presented a legitimate security challenge to the government of Israel, and it also makes it difficult to ever achieve peace for the Palestinian people. If you see Hamas having the ability to arm itself and re-equip and reconstitute its terrorist infrastructure. So we have been working on proposals with the government of Egypt, with the government of Israel, on how you could address that challenge, but I'm not going to confirm the specifics of any one proposal.
Okay, and you said it was a real problem. Is it no longer a real problem?
I was speaking to the pre-October 7th context.
Sure, but this is still presumably an issue.
So Israel has control of that stretch of Gaza now, and I'm not going to give a definitive assessment that there's no smuggling coming in, but you've seen the Rafah border crossing shut down completely, something we oppose, and you've seen Israel going in and shutting down smuggling tunnels. I can't tell you whether smuggling has been completely eliminated, but certainly it's a different context now with Israel having control of the Philadelphia corridor.